Trembling with rage, Jamal Walters stared at the stunned faces of the airline staff as he revealed his identity. "I own 40% of this airline," he declared, holding up his phone. "Everyone in this terminal is fired. Effective immediately." His revenge had only just begun. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to see how justice gets served when the wrong person gets discriminated against. You won't believe how this power move transforms an entire company. Long before Jamal Walters became the man who could fire an entire airline terminal with a single sentence, he was just a determined kid from the South Bronx with extraordinary dreams. Growing up in a neighborhood where success stories were rare, Jamal stood out from an early age. His mother, a public school teacher, instilled in him an unshakable belief that education could open doors no one thought possible. By 16, Jamal had already created his first software program in a community center computer lab with outdated equipment. While other teenagers played basketball or hung out on street corners, Jamal worked through countless nights, teaching himself coding languages and algorithmic thinking through free online courses and borrowed textbooks. His breakthrough came during his junior year at MIT, where he'd earned a full scholarship. Jamal developed an artificial intelligence system that could predict maintenance needs for complex machinery with unprecedented accuracy. What began as a school project quickly caught the attention of major transportation companies desperate to reduce costly downtime and safety incidents. At 24, Jamal founded Operate AI, a startup that revolutionized how airlines managed their operations. His software could identify potential mechanical issues before they became problems, optimize flight paths to save fuel, and streamline crew scheduling in ways that saved millions. Within 5 years, every major airline in America was using some version of his technology. "My software wasn't just about efficiency," Jamal once explained in a rare interview. "It was about safety and reliability. When planes run on time and without issues, that's not just good business. It's literally saving lives." By 32, Jamal had expanded beyond software into strategic investments. His philosophy was simple but powerful: invest in the companies using his technology, then transform them from within. It wasn't enough to provide tools, he wanted to reshape entire industries. Sky Elite Airways became his most ambitious acquisition. The struggling airline had good bones but terrible management. Through a series of careful maneuvers with investment partners, Jamal acquired a 40% ownership stake in the company, enough to influence major decisions while keeping his involvement quiet from the public and most employees. "Never let them see you coming," was the advice Jamal's first business mentor had given him, and he took it to heart. He preferred working behind the scenes, evaluating his companies by experiencing them as a customer would. "The day executives stop experiencing their own products is the day quality begins to die," he often told Tasha Williams, his trusted executive assistant who had been with him since the early days of Operate AI. Tasha wasn't just any assistant, she was Jamal's strategic partner, confidant, and the person who helped build his empire brick by brick. With her law background and razor-sharp instincts, she had saved him from countless bad deals and helped navigate the treacherous waters of being a black man in overwhelmingly white corporate America. "Remember the investor meeting at Platinum Capital?" Tasha had asked him just last week, as they prepared for his trip to Los Angeles. Jamal nodded, the memory still fresh despite being 3 years old. He had arrived for a meeting to secure funding for expansion, dressed in a custom $3,000 suit. The receptionist had directed him to the service entrance, assuming he was a delivery person. When he politely explained he had a meeting with the partners, security was called. That incident ended with Jamal walking away from a potential $20 million deal. He didn't need investors who couldn't see past his skin color. Instead, he found different partners and ended up making triple what Platinum would have invested. Such experiences had shaped Jamal's zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind in his businesses. Any hint of racial bias among his employees was addressed immediately, usually with termination. Some called him harsh, but Jamal saw it differently. "Prejudice isn't a learning curve issue," he explained to his management teams. It's a character issue. I'm not running remedial human decency classes. His upcoming trip to Los Angeles was perhaps his most important yet, finalizing a billion-dollar merger that would take his company public and secure his vision for the future. For the first time since acquiring his ownership stake, Jamal decided to fly Sky Elite Airways. He wanted to experience the service firsthand before entrusting the airline with a larger role in his expanding business empire. "Are you sure you don't want to use the private jet?" Tasha had asked when he booked the commercial flight. "The merger documents can wait an extra day." "I need to see how Sky Elite treats its customers," Jamal insisted. "Not just how they treat a known owner. Book me in first class, but use my middle name. And no special notifications to the staff." What Jamal couldn't have known was that this routine flight would become a turning point not just for Sky Elite Airways, but for his own approach to fighting the discrimination he'd faced his entire life, no matter how many zeros appeared in his bank account. The morning of the flight, Jamal dressed deliberately. Though his closet contained custom suits from the finest tailors in New York, he chose dark jeans, a simple black t-shirt, and a navy blazer. The only hints of his wealth were subtle: a titanium Patek Philippe watch worth more than some homes and a handcrafted leather briefcase containing his laptop. Arriving at JFK International Airport, Jamal joined the first-class check-in line. The agent barely looked up as she verified his identity and boarding pass. "Window or aisle preference, sir?" she asked, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been with the white businessman ahead of him. "I've already selected seat 2A, thank you," Jamal replied, maintaining his usual calm demeanor. He'd long ago learned that showing any emotion, particularly anger, would immediately be used against him. At the security checkpoint, Jamal was randomly selected for additional screening despite his first-class status and TSA pre-check designation. The older white couple ahead of him sailed through with a friendly nod from the agent. Jamal submitted to the extra security measures without comment, though he noted each face and badge number for later. Boarding began precisely on schedule. Jamal waited as priority travelers with young children and those needing assistance were welcomed aboard. When first-class boarding was announced, he stepped forward, boarding pass in hand. "Sir, it's not your group yet," a gate agent named Darren said, despite the first class clearly printed on Jamal's boarding pass. "I'm in first class," Jamal stated calmly, showing his boarding pass again. Darren's expression shifted from dismissive to surprised, then to a tight smile. "Oh, I see. Go ahead." As Jamal walked down the jet bridge, he made mental notes about the interaction. This wasn't his first experience with assumptions based on his appearance, and he doubted it would be his last. But as a major stakeholder in the airline, he now had the power to address these issues systematically. On board, flight attendant Brenda Calloway barely acknowledged Jamal as he located his seat in the first row of first class. When the older white couple from security arrived moments later, Brenda's demeanor transformed instantly. "Welcome aboard. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage? Water, juice, or champagne perhaps?" she offered warmly. When she finally turned to Jamal, her smile tightened. "Anything to drink?" she asked curtly. "Sparkling water with lime, please," Jamal replied. 15 minutes passed. The white couple had received their drinks, fresh newspapers, and warm towels. Jamal's seat remained empty of all amenities. When he pressed the call button, Brenda appeared with obvious reluctance. "Yes?" she asked, finger already reaching to turn off the call light. "I ordered sparkling water some time ago," Jamal reminded her. "We're very busy with boarding," she replied. "I'll try to get to it before takeoff." The final boarding groups were being called when a commotion at the front of the cabin caught Jamal's attention. A white man in his 50s with silver hair and an expression of practiced authority was speaking loudly to Brenda. "What do you mean my usual seat is taken? I specifically requested 2A. I always sit in 2A when I fly this route." The man's voice carried the entitlement of someone unaccustomed to hearing no. Jamal recognized him immediately, Garrett Thompson, executive vice president at First Capital Bank. They had never formally met, but Jamal had sat across from him at industry events. Thompson had never acknowledged him on those occasions either. Brenda's eyes darted toward Jamal, then back to Thompson. "I understand, Mr. Thompson. Let me see what I can do." She hurried away, returning moments later with a senior flight attendant and the captain himself, Harold Jenkins, still adjusting his uniform as if called for more important duties. "What seems to be the issue?" Captain Jenkins asked, his attention focused entirely on Thompson. "This is unacceptable," Thompson complained. "I'm a Diamond Elite member. I always sit in 2A. It's in my preference profile." Jenkins nodded sympathetically. "I understand, sir. Let me see what we can do to sort this out." Only then did the three staff members turn their attention to Jamal. Brenda stepped forward. "Sir, we have a situation. Mr. Thompson is one of our most valued frequent flyers with Diamond Elite status. He has a standing preference for this particular seat. We need to ask you to relocate." Jamal raised an eyebrow slightly. "I booked this seat weeks ago. My boarding pass assigns me to 2A. He held up his phone showing the electronic confirmation. "I'm not interested in changing seats." Brenda's friendly facade cracked. "Sir, perhaps you don't understand. Mr. Thompson flies with us weekly and specifically requires this seat for medical reasons." Jamal looked directly at Thompson, who showed no signs of any medical distress requiring a specific seat. If there were medical accommodations needed, they should have been arranged during booking. "My seat assignment is confirmed." Several passengers had begun watching the interaction. Some had phones partially raised, sensing a viral moment in the making. Captain Jenkins stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, we can offer you a complimentary beverage voucher for your cooperation. It would really help us out." "No thank you," Jamal replied firmly. "I booked this seat, checked in on time, and I'm already settled." The tension in the cabin thickened. Thompson leaned toward the captain and whispered something. Jenkins nodded and straightened his posture, now addressing Jamal with newfound authority. "Sir, as captain of this aircraft, I need to ensure all passengers are satisfied and that we maintain an orderly cabin. I'm going to have to insist you relocate." Jamal remained perfectly still. "On what grounds?" Jenkins' jaw tightened. "On the grounds that I'm the captain and I've made a decision about seating arrangements on my aircraft. Is it company policy to remove passengers from their assigned seats to accommodate others' preferences?" Jamal asked, his voice level but carrying enough for nearby passengers to hear. Thompson interrupted, his patience visibly thinning. "Look, just take another seat. There are plenty available." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Know your place." A young black woman seated across the aisle shifted uncomfortably, clearly having overheard the comment. Her eyes met Jamal's briefly, a silent acknowledgement of what was really happening. Brenda stepped closer. "Sir, if you continue to be difficult, we'll consider this a disruption to cabin safety and will act accordingly." Jamal looked around slowly. The mostly white passengers in first class averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by safety cards and window views. Only the young woman across the aisle held his gaze, her expression a mixture of sympathy and helplessness. In that moment, Jamal had a choice. He could reveal his ownership stake now and end this immediately, or he could document how Sky Elite Airways truly operated when they didn't know who was watching. "I'd like to speak to your customer service manager," Jamal stated calmly. "That won't be necessary," Jenkins replied. "This isn't a customer service issue, it's a matter of cabin management." Jamal noticed two men in plain clothes approaching from the rear of the aircraft. Air marshals, responding to some silent signal from the crew. Everything was escalating exactly as it had countless times before in Jamal's life, only this time, the ending would be very different. The air marshals positioned themselves on either side of Jamal's seat, their presence creating an immediate hush throughout the first-class cabin. One was a broad-shouldered white man with a military haircut, the other, a shorter Latino man with an impassive expression. Neither displayed any identification, but their purpose was clear. "Sir," the taller marshal said, "we need you to come with us." Jamal remained perfectly still. "On what grounds am I being removed from my assigned seat?" Captain Jenkins stepped forward again. "You're causing a disturbance and refusing crew member instructions. That's a federal violation." "I've raised my voice to no one," Jamal replied evenly. "I've simply declined to give up the seat I purchased." Nearby, Garrett Thompson made a show of checking his watch. "This is ridiculous. Some people just need to learn respect for the system." The comment was just loud enough for those in nearby seats to hear. A few passengers nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. "Final warning," Brenda said, her voice carrying artificial authority. "Either move voluntarily or you'll be escorted off the aircraft entirely." Jamal weighed his options quickly. Getting removed from the flight would complicate his plans in Los Angeles, but it would also create a clearer case of discrimination. Accepting another seat would allow him to continue documenting the airline's practices. "Fine," he said finally. "Where would you like me to move?" Brenda's triumphant smile lasted only a second before she composed herself. "We have a middle seat available in row 27. Not just economy, but a middle seat in one of the last rows." The message couldn't have been clearer. "You're moving me from first class to a middle seat in economy?" Jamal asked, making sure everyone nearby heard. "It's all that's available," Brenda lied smoothly. Jamal had checked the seat map that morning. The flight was barely two-thirds full. The young black woman across the aisle finally spoke up. "That's not right. There are empty seats all over Economy Plus. I can see them from here." Brenda turned to her sharply. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am. It concerns everyone when rules apply differently to different people," the woman responded, holding Brenda's gaze. Captain Jenkins intervened. "Ma'am, please don't involve yourself or you may also be considered disruptive." The threat silenced her, but her eyes communicated volumes to Jamal as he gathered his briefcase. As he stood, Thompson immediately took his seat, arranging himself with obvious satisfaction. "Thank you for seeing reason," he said, not bothering to look at Jamal. The walk back through first class felt interminable. Jamal could feel eyes following him, some curious, some satisfied, some embarrassed on his behalf. The air marshal stayed close behind, as if he might suddenly revolt. At the boundary between first class and economy, Brenda stopped him. "I'll need to hold your phone during the flight." "Excuse me?" Jamal asked. "Security protocol during a passenger incident. We need to ensure you're not using electronic devices inappropriately." It was a transparent attempt to prevent him from documenting what was happening. Jamal knew his rights. That's not a legitimate request under FAA regulations. "I'm keeping my phone." The taller air marshal stepped closer. "Sir, you've already caused enough trouble. Hand over the phone." Aware that further resistance might indeed get him removed from the flight, Jamal reluctantly surrendered his phone. "I'll expect that back immediately upon landing." Brenda took the phone with undisguised satisfaction. "Of course." The humiliation continued as Jamal made his way through premium economy, then regular economy, feeling the stares of curious passengers. Someone whispered, "What did he do?" loud enough for him to hear. Row 27 was indeed at the back of the plane, just in front of the lavatories. The seat itself was visibly smaller than what other economy passengers had, an older configuration the airline had yet to update. On either side sat passengers who had already claimed both armrests. "Excuse me," Jamal said politely to the passengers as he squeezed into the middle seat. The older white woman by the window pursed her lips and shifted slightly away from him. The businessman on the aisle sighed dramatically, as if Jamal's presence was an imposition on his comfort. From this vantage point, Jamal could see first-class passengers still boarding, including several who were directed to empty seats, proving Brenda's claim of no available seats had been a complete fabrication. As if to emphasize the disparity in treatment, Jamal watched as Brenda personally delivered Thompson a glass of champagne before the plane had even finished boarding. A clear violation of safety protocols requiring crew to be seated during taxiing. Through the gap between seats, Jamal could see the young woman who had spoken up being served with noticeably less enthusiasm than other first-class passengers. Brenda's body language communicated clear displeasure at the woman's intervention. Without his phone, Jamal was forced to mentally document every detail, names, times, statements made. His memory had always been exceptional, a trait that had served him well throughout his education and business career. After takeoff, as beverage service began, Jamal observed another flight attendant, Kyle Turner, making his way through the cabin. When he reached Jamal's row, he barely paused. "Something to drink?" he asked, already reaching for the next passenger's request. "Water, please," Jamal replied. Kyle handed him a plastic cup with no ice, already moving on. For other passengers, Jamal noticed, drinks were poured from bottles and cans at their seats. His pre-poured water had a faintly soapy taste, as if the cup had been improperly rinsed. From several rows ahead, Jamal could hear Kyle and another flight attendant, Lisa Perkins, speaking in hushed tones. "That's the guy from first class," Lisa whispered. "The one who wouldn't give up his seat." "Some people don't know how things work," Kyle replied. "Thompson's our biggest revenue passenger on this route. Always books last minute, always pays full fare." Their voices dropped lower, but their glances back toward row 27 made their topic of conversation obvious. The indignities continued throughout the flight. When meal service began, economy passengers were offered a choice between chicken and pasta. When the cart reached Jamal's row, the flight attendant announced, "Pasta only for this section." When Jamal needed to use the lavatory, a flight attendant accidentally blocked his path with the beverage cart for nearly 5 minutes, despite allowing other passengers to pass. Each incident was minor in isolation, the kind of treatment that, when reported, would be dismissed as oversensitivity or coincidence. Together, they formed an unmistakable pattern that Jamal had experienced countless times throughout his life, regardless of his achievements or status. The difference now was that Jamal had the power to do something about it. Without his phone, he couldn't contact Tasha directly, but he knew exactly what would happen once he landed. What the crew of Flight SK-1372 didn't realize was that they weren't humiliating an ordinary passenger who could be bullied and forgotten. They were providing the owner of their company with first-hand experience of the rot within his airline, and signing their own professional death warrants in the process. Trapped in the cramped middle seat of row 27, Jamal settled into a state of hyper-awareness. Each interaction, each subtle slight became another piece of evidence in the case he was building. Without his phone, he had to rely on his memory and powers of observation, skills he had honed since childhood. 30 minutes into the flight, Jamal noticed Garrett Thompson repeatedly pressing the call button in first class. Each time, Brenda rushed over with an eager smile. Ice needed refreshing. A different magazine was requested. The temperature was too cold, then too warm. Each trivial demand was met with immediate attention while actual needs in economy went unaddressed. "Is it always this bad?" Jamal asked the woman sitting beside him. She looked up from her book, surprised at being addressed. "What do you mean?" "The service. The treatment of economy passengers." She shrugged. "It's a flight. Nobody expects much anymore. This acceptance of poor treatment, this lowering of expectations, was exactly what allowed discriminatory practices to flourish. People stopped questioning why certain passengers were treated differently than others. A voice came from across the aisle. "It's not usually this obvious." Jamal turned to see a young black woman in her early 30s. Unlike his seatmate, she met his eyes directly. "I'm Zora Jackson," she said. "I saw what happened up front." "Jamal Walters," he replied, offering his hand. Zora looked around before leaning slightly closer. I used to work for Sky Elite customer service. What they did wasn't just bad service, it was textbook discrimination. This was an unexpected stroke of luck. You used to work for the airline? She nodded. 3 years in their call center, then 2 as a customer experience manager before I left. The culture is toxic from top to bottom. For the next hour, as other passengers dozed or watched movies, Jamal and Zora spoke in low voices. She described systematic issues throughout Sky Elite, how customer complaints from passengers with ethnic-sounding names were flagged for special handling, effectively dismissal, how black employees were passed over for promotions despite superior performance metrics, how executives joked about premium demographics when discussing desired first-class passengers. I finally quit when I overheard my manager tell a new hire to be extra vigilant with certain types of passengers, Zora explained. When I asked what he meant, he just winked and said, "You know exactly what I mean." I filed a complaint with HR. 2 weeks later, I was let go for performance issues despite having just received an excellent review. Did you consider legal action? Jamal asked. On what grounds? They never put the racist stuff in writing. It was all winks and nods and, you know what I mean. I signed an arbitration agreement when I was hired. My lawyer said it would cost more to fight than I could ever win. This was the reality for so many employees and customers, barriers to justice built into the very system designed to protect corporations from accountability. As they spoke, Jamal noticed flight attendants Kyle and Lisa watching them suspiciously from the galley. Their conversation was apparently concerning enough to warrant attention. They don't like us talking, Zora observed. Probably worried I'm telling you how to file a complaint. Is there an effective way? Jamal asked. Zora laughed softly. Not really. Complaints go to a team that's evaluated on how few reach management. They're professional dismissers. Around them, the flight continued. The contrast in service between white passengers and passengers of color became increasingly obvious once Jamal knew to look for it. Longer waits for assistance. Shorter, less friendly interactions. Assumptions about beverage choices. Each difference was subtle. Easily explained away in isolation, damning in aggregate. Have you ever experienced treatment like this? I've been reading your comments, and it's shocking how common these situations are. Type 1 if you've ever been treated differently because of your race or appearance. Hit that like button if you believe companies should be held accountable for discrimination. Are you subscribed yet? You won't want to miss what happens next when Jamal finally reveals who he really is. So what will you do? Zora asked after sharing particularly damning details about the airline's internal practices. File a complaint? Write a bad review? Jamal considered his response carefully. I believe in addressing problems at their source. Good luck with that, Zora replied skeptically. The source is a corporate culture that starts in the boardroom. Precisely, Jamal agreed, not yet revealing his position to impact exactly that. As the flight entered its final hour, Jamal observed Garrett Thompson becoming increasingly intoxicated in first class. His voice carried through the cabin as he loudly discussed investment opportunities with his seatmate, name-dropping executives and dollar amounts to establish his importance. That guy's been flagged for inappropriate behavior 3 times, Zora whispered. But he spends so much on last-minute first-class tickets that nothing ever happens. How do you know that? Jamal asked. I had access to the VIP passenger database. His file had warnings, but also a note, revenue protection. Supervisory approval required for any discipline. This information confirmed what Jamal had suspected, there was a systemic problem with accountability that went beyond individual employees. The airline had institutionalized preferential treatment while ignoring bad behavior from certain passengers. As the captain announced their initial descent into Los Angeles, Brenda appeared in economy, making her way directly to row 27. Sir, she said to Jamal with artificial politeness, I'll need you to remain seated until all other passengers have deplaned when we arrive. May I ask why? Jamal responded. Security protocol following a cabin incident, she replied, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, creating the impression that Jamal had done something threatening. What incident? He challenged. I complied with your inappropriate request to surrender my rightful seat. Brenda's smile tightened. Nevertheless, those are my instructions from the captain. As she walked away, Zora leaned over. They're hoping you'll cause a scene so they can have you detained at the gate. I've seen it before. I don't cause scenes, Jamal replied calmly. I solve problems. When the plane finally touched down at LAX and taxied to the gate, Jamal remained perfectly still as other passengers gathered their belongings. He noticed Kyle standing at the back of the plane, watching him intently. At the front, Brenda personally escorted Garrett Thompson off the aircraft first, carrying his coat and briefcase like a personal valet. The young woman who had spoken up in first class paused as she passed Jamal's row. What they did wasn't right, she said quietly, slipping him a business card. I'm an employment attorney. Call me if you want to discuss options. Jamal accepted the card with a nod of thanks. Another ally he hadn't expected. When the final passenger had departed, Brenda approached with Jamal's phone. Your device, sir. In the future, I suggest upgrading to first class if you expect premium treatment. Her tone made it clear she didn't believe he could afford such luxuries. Jamal accepted his phone without comment and gathered his belongings. As he finally exited the aircraft, Brenda couldn't resist a parting shot. Have a nice day, sir. We know you have choices in airlines, and we hope you make a different one next time. Little did she know, Jamal Walters wasn't just choosing airlines. He owned this one. And changes were coming faster than anyone could imagine. The jet bridge at LAX felt like the threshold to a moment Jamal had been preparing for his entire career. As he stepped into the terminal, he immediately opened his phone and sent a brief text to Tasha, situation at LAX Terminal 5. Sky Elite Flight 1372. Need you here with legal team ASAP. Bring ownership documentation. Her response came seconds later, on it. ETA 35 minutes. Jamal had built his business empire by being strategic, not reactive. The discrimination he just experienced wasn't merely a personal affront, it was evidence of deep institutional problems within a company he partially owned. Problems that would drive away customers, create liability, and ultimately damage shareholder value if left unaddressed. Rather than immediately revealing his identity, Jamal decided to experience the full customer service process. He walked directly to the Sky Elite customer service desk in the terminal, where 3 agents were handling various passenger issues. I'd like to speak with someone about a concerning incident on my flight, Jamal stated to the first available agent, a middle-aged man whose nameplate read, Philip West, Customer Service Manager. Philip's eyes flickered over Jamal briefly, taking in his casual attire and making an immediate assessment. Fill out this form and we'll get back to you within 6 to 8 weeks, he said, sliding a paper across the counter without looking up from his computer. I'd prefer to discuss this now, Jamal insisted calmly. It involves discriminatory treatment by your flight crew. Philip sighed as if deeply inconvenienced. Everyone thinks they've experienced discrimination when they don't get exactly what they want. His use of air quotes around discrimination made his dismissiveness clear. What exactly happened? Jamal recounted the events precisely. His assigned first-class seat, the demand to move for Thompson, the involvement of air marshals, the confiscation of his phone, and the systematic mistreatment throughout the flight. As he spoke, Philip's expression shifted from boredom to impatience. When Jamal finished, the manager didn't even pretend to take the complaint seriously. Sounds like you were uncooperative with crew instructions, which is a violation of federal regulations. The captain has absolute authority over seating arrangements for balance and safety reasons. Nevertheless, I can offer you a $50 voucher for your inconvenience. He pushed a pre-printed voucher across the counter. The captain explicitly stated the seat change was to accommodate Mr. Thompson's preference, not for balance or safety, Jamal corrected. And the flight attendant admitted I was moved because Thompson is a high-revenue passenger. I wasn't there, so I can't comment on what was or wasn't said, Philip replied. The voucher is our standard compensation for perceived service issues. Jamal left the voucher untouched. I'd like to speak with your supervisor. I am the supervisor on duty. Then I'd like to speak with the terminal director. Philip laughed softly. The terminal director doesn't get involved in routine customer complaints. This isn't routine, Jamal stated. This is a documented case of racial discrimination by multiple employees. I'm happy to wait while you contact them. Something in Jamal's tone, the calm certainty, perhaps, finally penetrated Philip's dismissive attitude. He studied Jamal more carefully. Wait here, he said, disappearing into a back office. 10 minutes passed before a woman in her 50s emerged. Her Sky Elite uniform was more tailored than the customer service staff, with additional insignia indicating senior management status. I'm Sandra Miller, Terminal Director for Sky Elite at LAX, she introduced herself with practiced corporate warmth. I understand you had some concerns about your flight experience today. Not concerns. Documented instances of discrimination, Jamal corrected. I was removed from my assigned first-class seat to accommodate a white passenger, subjected to differential treatment by the crew, and had my personal property confiscated without cause. Sandra maintained her professional smile. These situations are often complicated, with many factors that passengers aren't aware of. Our crew members make real-time decisions based on operational needs. The crew explicitly stated I was being moved because Mr. Thompson is a valuable frequent flyer, who always sits in 2A, Jamal interrupted. That's not an operational need, that's preferential treatment that violated my rights as a paying customer. Without reviewing the full situation. Then let's review it, Jamal suggested. The captain, Harold Jenkins, and flight attendants Brenda Calloway, Kyle Turner, and Lisa Perkins were all involved. I'm sure they're still in the terminal. Sandra's smile tightened. They're preparing for their next flight. I can assure you we take these allegations seriously, but there's very little I can do at this moment besides taking your information for follow-up. By now, other Sky Elite staff had begun gathering nearby, sensing a situation developing. A security officer positioned himself casually within earshot. Passengers walking past slowed, picking up on the tension. Ms. Miller, Jamal said, his voice remaining measured, are you familiar with federal aviation regulations regarding passenger rights and discrimination? Of course, but... And Sky Elite's own policies regarding seat assignments and customer treatment? Yes, but operational decisions. Then you know that what happened today violated both federal regulations and company policy, Jamal continued. I'd like to speak with someone who has the authority to address this properly. Sandra's professional demeanor began showing cracks. Sir, I am the highest authority in this terminal. If you're unsatisfied with our response, you can contact our corporate customer relations department. She slid a business card across the counter. Now, if there's nothing else, we have other passengers to assist. It was the same pattern Jamal had experienced throughout his life: dismissal, deflection, deferral. Assumptions that he would eventually give up and go away. But this time was different. This time, he had the power to demand accountability. Actually, there is something else, Jamal replied, noticing Tasha entering the terminal with 3 people in suits, Sky Elite's legal team, right on schedule. I'd like you to gather everyone involved in today's incident. Captain Jenkins, the flight attendants, Mr. West here, and yourself. Sandra's patience visibly thinned. That's not possible or necessary. If you wish to file a formal complaint. I'm not filing a complaint, Jamal interrupted. I'm conducting a performance review. Excuse me. Sandra's confusion was evident. Jamal, Tasha called, approaching with quick strides. I have the documents you requested. Sandra looked between them, uncertainty replacing her dismissive attitude. Who exactly are you? Jamal smiled for the first time since boarding the plane that morning. My name is Jamal Walters. I own 40% of Sky Elite Airways and sit on the executive board. The color drained from Sandra's face. Philip, who had been pretending to work nearby while listening, froze at his terminal. That's not possible, Sandra stammered. We would have been notified of a VIP passenger. I traveled anonymously to experience the actual customer service, not the performance you put on for known executives, Jamal explained as Tasha handed him a tablet displaying ownership documents. Based on today's experience, Sky Elite has significant problems that require immediate attention. The security guard who had been hovering nearby suddenly found somewhere else to be. Other airline staff who had gathered to watch the difficult passenger being handled began discreetly retreating. Mr. Walters, I had no idea, Sandra began. Clearly, Jamal cut her off. Now, I believe I asked you to gather the flight crew from SK-1372. We have matters to discuss. Within 15 minutes, the Sky Elite customer service area had transformed into an impromptu boardroom. Captain Jenkins, Brenda Calloway, Kyle Turner, Lisa Perkins, and several other crew members stood in an uncomfortable semicircle before Jamal, who remained calmly seated at a small conference table Tasha had commandeered from a nearby office. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Staff members who had been dismissive or hostile now stood with rigid postures and downcast eyes. Sandra Miller had been frantically making calls, confirming Jamal's identity and authority with increasingly panicked expressions. I've spoken with corporate headquarters, Sandra announced, returning from a private call. They've confirmed Mr. Walters' position and have granted him full operational authority for this situation. Jenkins stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Walters, had we known who you were? Jamal left the hand unshaken. That's precisely the problem, Captain. Your behavior should not depend on a passenger's status or identity. Brenda Calloway attempted damage control. Sir, there seems to have been a misunderstanding regarding the seating arrangements. Our Diamond Elite members have certain expectations. I'm well aware of the Diamond Elite program, Ms. Calloway. I helped design the recent updates to our loyalty tiers, Jamal replied. Nowhere in those programs does it state that elite members can displace other passengers from their assigned seats. The terminal fell into an uncomfortable silence as more airline staff gathered at the periphery, watching the unprecedented scene unfold. Passengers walking past slowed their pace, sensing something significant happening. Where is Mr. Thompson now? Jamal asked. He had a connecting flight to San Francisco, Lisa Perkins offered quickly, clearly hoping to be seen as helpful. No, he didn't, Zora's voice came from behind the assembled staff. She stepped forward, having followed the developing situation. He's at the Admiral's Club. I saw him enter as I was walking to my connection. Jamal nodded to Zora appreciatively. Ms. Jackson, thank you for joining us. Your insights on the flight were particularly valuable. The crew members exchanged nervous glances, realizing that Jamal and Zora had been discussing the airline's practices throughout the flight. Tasha had been quietly working on her tablet, occasionally showing documents to the legal team. She approached Jamal and whispered, "The regional director is here." Anthony Barnes, Sky Elite's Western Regional Director, pushed through the gathered crowd with the forced confidence of an executive trying to contain a situation. In his 50s with an expensive haircut and perfectly tailored suit, Barnes represented the corporate face of the airline. Jamal, he greeted with artificial warmth, using the first name to suggest familiarity they didn't actually share. What an unexpected pleasure to have you visit our LAX operation. If we'd known you were traveling today, you'd have hidden all this, Jamal finished for him, gesturing to the assembled staff. That's why I didn't announce my presence. I wanted to experience Sky Elite as our customers do. Barnes forced a laugh. Well, I hope the service met your expectations. If there were any minor issues. Minor issues? Jamal interrupted. Mr. Barnes, I was physically removed from my assigned first-class seat to accommodate a white passenger who arrived late. The crew called air marshals to intimidate me, confiscated my phone without cause, and subjected me to systematic discrimination throughout the flight. Barnes's smile faltered. I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Tasha interjected, turning her tablet to display a social media feed. The incident is already viral. Indeed, several passengers had recorded Jamal being escorted from first class and posted the videos online. Comments were flooding in, many from users sharing similar experiences with Sky Elite. The videos had already been shared thousands of times within the hour. Barnes paled visibly. We should discuss this privately, Jamal. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement. This isn't about an arrangement, Jamal stated firmly. This is about accountability. At that moment, commotion at the edge of the gathered crowd signaled another arrival. Garrett Thompson, looking slightly disheveled from his time at the Admirals Club, pushed his way forward. What's going on here? He demanded. My flight to San Francisco has been delayed, and the staff is all gathered here instead of preparing the aircraft. His eyes fell on Jamal, and recognition dawned. You're the guy from the plane. The one in my seat. Your seat. Jamal raised an eyebrow. I believe you mean my assigned seat, which you took after having me removed. Thompson scoffed. Look, I don't know what the issue is. I'm a Diamond Elite member, and that seat is always reserved for me. It's part of my member benefits. Is that so? Jamal asked. Ms. Miller, could you please pull up Mr. Thompson's passenger record? I'd like to review these special accommodations he claims to have. Sandra hurriedly accessed a terminal. Mr. Thompson flies with us frequently, but there's no standing reservation for seat 2A or any other specific seat in his profile. He books varying seat assignments depending on availability. Thompson's face reddened. That's absurd. Ask Brenda, she always makes sure I get that seat. All eyes turned to Brenda, who suddenly found her shoes fascinating. I try to accommodate our frequent flyers when possible. Even when it means removing other passengers from their rightfully assigned seats. Jamal pressed. I was just following instructions, Brenda defended, looking toward Captain Jenkins. Jenkins immediately distanced himself. My concern was resolving the situation quickly to maintain our departure schedule. By violating company policy and possibly federal aviation regulations? Jamal asked. The blame shifting continued until Tasha interrupted by placing several documents on the table. We've pulled the customer complaint history for the past year. There are 27 similar incidents reported involving this crew, with a statistically significant pattern of non-white passengers being displaced or receiving inferior service. Those complaints were addressed according to protocol, Barnes insisted. By offering $50 vouchers and form letter apologies, Tasha countered. No disciplinary action, no policy changes, no meaningful response at all. As the evidence mounted, Thompson attempted to slip away unnoticed. Jamal called after him. Mr. Thompson, I believe we should discuss your role in today's events as well. Thompson turned back, irritation clear on his face. My role? I'm a customer who expects proper treatment based on my loyalty status. You're a customer who expected and received preferential treatment based on your race and perceived status, Jamal corrected. According to our records, you've been involved in 8 separate incidents involving displaced passengers, all of them people of color. Thompson's expression hardened. That's ridiculous. I don't even notice. You don't notice race. Jamal finished for him. Know your place. That's what you said to me on the aircraft. What exactly did you mean by that? The gathered crowd grew silent, waiting for Thompson's response. His face flushed deeper. You're taking that completely out of context. Am I? Jamal looked around at the assembled staff. Did anyone else hear Mr. Thompson make this comment? Lisa Perkins reluctantly raised her hand. I heard him say it. I didn't report it because. Her voice trailed off. Because? Jamal prompted. Because passengers like Mr. Thompson are protected, she admitted. We're told not to escalate issues with high-revenue customers, even when they violate our conduct policies. This admission opened the floodgates. Other staff members began sharing similar experiences, how complaints about certain passengers were buried, how employees who enforced rules equally were reprimanded, how systematic discrimination had become normalized within the company culture. As the testimonies continued, Barnes made increasingly desperate attempts to contain the situation. Jamal, this is hardly the venue for such discussions. Let's take this to a private setting where we can. No, Jamal stated firmly. Transparency starts now. Sky Elite has a disease, and treating it requires first acknowledging it exists. He turned to address the entire gathered group. What happened today wasn't an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It was the predictable result of a corporate culture that values certain customers over others based on race and perceived status. That ends today. Jamal stood, his calm demeanor unbroken but his authority unmistakable. Effective immediately, I am exercising my authority as major shareholder and board member to suspend all staff directly involved in today's incident pending a full investigation. Barnes stepped forward in alarm. You can't just. I can and I am, Jamal interrupted. Furthermore, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. He checked his watch. The board members are already being notified, and will convene via video conference in 30 minutes. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Those who had dismissed Jamal hours earlier now stood silent as he took control of the situation with the calm precision that had built his business empire. Tasha, Jamal continued, please ensure our legal team has complete access to all relevant records. Mr. Barnes, you'll join the board meeting to explain why these practices have been allowed to continue under your supervision. As Jamal issued directives, the terminal had become unnaturally quiet. Passengers and staff alike watched the unprecedented scene unfold, a black man who had been discriminated against revealing himself to be the owner, turning humiliation into a moment of accountability. For Sky Elite Airways, nothing would ever be the same again. The Sky Elite conference room at LAX, normally reserved for crew briefings and operational meetings, had been hastily transformed into command central for what staff were already calling the Walters Reckoning. Large monitors displayed video feeds of board members connecting from across the country, their expressions ranging from concern to outright panic. Jamal sat at the head of the table, reviewing documents Tasha had organized into precise categories: passenger complaints, employee reports, internal communications, and policy violations. The evidence of systematic discrimination was overwhelming once properly compiled. The board is ready, Tasha announced, adjusting the final video connection. Jamal nodded and addressed the assembled faces on the screens. Thank you for joining this emergency session. I apologize for the short notice, but the situation requires immediate attention. Gerald Hoffman, the board chairman, leaned toward his camera. Jamal, while we appreciate your concern, suspending an entire terminal's senior staff seems rather extreme without proper review procedures. I've followed exactly the procedures outlined in our corporate bylaws regarding emergency executive action, Jamal replied. Section 8, Paragraph 4 specifically grants major shareholders direct intervention rights in cases involving potential legal liability or significant brand damage. Several board members glanced down, presumably checking these provisions they had never expected to be invoked. For those who haven't seen it yet, Jamal continued, the videos of my treatment on today's flight have reached over 200,000 views in the past hour. Hashtag Sky Elite Racism is trending nationally. A palpable tension filled the virtual meeting. Corporate boards feared few things more than viral social media scandals. Jamal proceeded to outline the day's events with clinical precision, sharing documentation and witness statements. As he spoke, Anthony Barnes shifted uncomfortably beside him, occasionally attempting to interject with explanations that Jamal smoothly cut off. "This isn't an isolated incident," Jamal concluded. "Our legal team has identified a pattern of similar complaints that were systematically minimized or dismissed. We're potentially facing multiple class action lawsuits if we don't address this immediately and comprehensively." The mood in the virtual boardroom darkened further at the mention of legal exposure. "What exactly are you proposing?" asked Victoria Chambers, the newest board member and the only other person of color in the leadership team. "A complete overhaul of our customer service protocols, retraining of all customer-facing staff, termination of those directly involved in discriminatory practices, and a transparent public response acknowledging our failures and committing to specific improvements," Jamal replied without hesitation. "That's going to be extremely costly," objected William Porter, the chief financial officer. "Not as costly as the lawsuits, regulatory penalties, and brand destruction we'll face otherwise," Jamal countered. "But this isn't just about cost mitigation. It's about building the kind of company we claim to be in our mission statement." As the discussion continued, the door to the conference room opened. Zora Jackson entered, escorted by one of Tasha's assistants. "This is a closed board meeting," Barnes objected immediately. "Ms. Jackson is here at my invitation," Jamal stated. "She has valuable insights as both a former employee and a witness to today's events." Zora approached the table with confidence that belied her unexpected presence in a board meeting. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. What Mr. Walters experienced today is unfortunately common practice at Sky Elite. During my 5 years with the company, I documented numerous instances of racial discrimination against both passengers and employees." She opened a laptop she had brought with her. "With Mr. Walters' permission, I'd like to share some of this documentation with the board." For the next 20 minutes, Zora presented a damning collection of internal communications, training materials with coded language about preferred customer profiles, and statistical analyses showing clear patterns of discriminatory treatment. As she concluded, the board members sat in stunned silence. Finally, Gerald Hoffman spoke. "Ms. Jackson, may I ask why you compiled this information? And why you're sharing it now?" "Initially, I gathered it for a potential lawsuit after I was terminated for reporting discrimination," Zora explained. "I ultimately decided against legal action because the arbitration agreement made it nearly impossible to win. I'm sharing it now because Mr. Walters has the power to actually fix these problems, and I believe he's genuinely committed to doing so." Her candid answer seemed to resonate with several board members. "One more thing," Zora added. "I'm not just a former employee. I'm also a workplace culture consultant specializing in diversity and inclusion implementation. Mr. Walters and I discussed potential reforms during the flight, before either of us revealed our professional identities." The revelation that Zora was actually a professional consultant shifted the dynamic further. What had seemed like a chance encounter was revealed as something more significant, perhaps even providential. "Mr. Walters," Victoria Chambers addressed Jamal directly, "it seems you've been planning organizational changes for some time. Is that accurate?" Jamal nodded. "Since acquiring my ownership stake, I've been evaluating operations throughout the company. Today's experience wasn't the beginning of my concerns, but it confirmed the need for immediate and comprehensive action." He opened a folder and distributed digital copies of a detailed proposal to all board members. "This is the organizational restructuring plan I've developed over the past 6 months. It addresses not just the customer-facing issues but the underlying cultural problems that create them." As board members scrolled through the comprehensive document, Barnes attempted to reassert control. "This is completely unprecedented. We have established procedures for policy changes that involve proper committee review and—" "Those procedures have failed," Jamal interrupted. "They've been used to maintain the status quo while creating the illusion of progress." From outside the conference room came the sound of raised voices. Tasha stepped out briefly, returning with news that further transformed the situation. "Multiple staff members are asking to speak with the board," she reported. They say they have information about systematic discrimination practices they were instructed to follow. Who's instructing them to come forward? Barnes demanded suspiciously. No one, Tasha replied. They're coming forward voluntarily after learning about today's events. Some have brought documentation they've been keeping privately. Jamal turned to the board members on the screens. I believe we should hear them. Over the next hour, a procession of flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives shared their experiences. Some had documented instances when they were reprimanded for treating all passengers equally instead of giving preference to certain demographics. Others described how reports of discriminatory behavior were routinely buried or minimized. One flight attendant, Daniel Rodriguez, presented emails from his supervisor explicitly instructing him to use discretion when enforcing rules for passengers who reflect our premium brand image, a phrase that investigation revealed was understood throughout the company as code for white, wealthy-appearing customers. As the testimonies continued, Barnes grew increasingly agitated. When a customer service manager revealed that Barnes himself had established a policy of flagging complaints from passengers with ethnic-sounding names for automatic denial, he finally erupted. This is a coordinated attack on the company's reputation. Barnes shouted. These employees are disgruntled individuals looking for personal gain. Is that why they're all risking their jobs to speak up? Jamal asked calmly. Or could it be that they've been waiting for someone to finally listen? The contrast between Barnes's emotional outburst and Jamal's composed leadership wasn't lost on the board members. One by one, they began expressing support for Jamal's proposed changes. Gerald Hoffman finally called for a formal vote. It seems clear that significant action is required. I move that we approve Mr. Walters' restructuring plan in principle, pending legal review of implementation details. The motion passed unanimously, even as Barnes slumped in defeat. Effective immediately, Hoffman continued, Mr. Walters is authorized to implement emergency management changes as outlined in his proposal. Mr. Barnes is placed on administrative leave pending investigation of his role in establishing discriminatory practices. As the meeting concluded, Jamal addressed the board one final time. Today isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. Sky Elite can become the company we've always claimed to be, one that truly values every customer and employee equally. The path forward will be challenging, but necessary. The reckoning had begun. As word spread throughout the company, employees who had long felt silence began to hope that real change might finally be possible. 1 week after the incident that employees now referred to simply as the flight, Sky Elite Airways headquarters in Atlanta buzzed with unprecedented activity. The executive floor, once an exclusive sanctuary for senior leadership, had been transformed into an open command center for what Jamal called Operation Reset. Conference rooms that had previously hosted closed-door meetings now featured glass walls covered with transparency reports, real-time customer feedback metrics, and accountability tracking boards. The message was clear: secrets and silos were things of the past. Jamal had temporarily relocated his primary office to Sky Elite headquarters, working 18-hour days alongside a hand-picked transition team. Today, he was personally interviewing candidates for several newly created leadership positions. What would you do if you observed a colleague giving preferential treatment based on a passenger's appearance? Jamal asked a candidate for the Director of Customer Experience position. The woman, a former hotel executive with an impressive track record of service excellence, considered the question carefully. First, I'd address it directly with the colleague to understand their reasoning. Then, regardless of their explanation, I'd report it through proper channels while ensuring the affected passenger receives appropriate resolution. Finally, I'd recommend reviewing the policies or training that might have enabled such behavior. Jamal nodded appreciatively. Her answer reflected the exact balance of individual accountability and systemic awareness he was looking for. By midday, Tasha entered with the latest media reports and financial updates. The stock has stabilized, she reported. After the initial 12% drop, we're now only down 4% from pre-incident levels. Analysts are cautiously optimistic about the changes. And the public response? Jamal asked. Mixed, but trending positive. Your CNN interview yesterday shifted the narrative considerably. The transparency about what happened and the concrete steps we're taking has resonated with many people. The hashtag has evolved from hashtag SkyEliteRacism to hashtag SkyEliteReset. This was progress, but Jamal knew that real change would be measured in actions, not hashtags. The transformation plan he'd implemented was comprehensive. First, every employee involved in the incident had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Those who had actively participated in discrimination were being terminated with cause. Those who had merely followed problematic policies were being evaluated for retraining and reassignment. Second, a complete audit of all company policies was underway, with an external civil rights law firm reviewing every procedure for potential discriminatory impact. Third, mandatory training programs were being developed in partnership with leading diversity and inclusion experts, including Zora Jackson, who had accepted a role as special advisor to the transition team. Fourth, a new passenger advocacy department was being established to ensure complaints were properly addressed rather than dismissed. Zora would lead this department once the initial transition was complete. Fifth, a whistleblower protection program with anonymous reporting capabilities was being implemented to ensure employees could safely report concerns without fear of retaliation. The changes weren't without challenges. A group of terminated employees had filed wrongful termination lawsuits, claiming they were simply following established protocols. Jamal had insisted on transparency even here, publicly releasing all evidence of discrimination rather than settling quietly as corporate legal had initially recommended. They want to argue they were just following orders. Jamal had said when presented with the lawsuit. Let's make sure everyone sees exactly what those orders were. When the internal emails and training materials became public, the lawsuits lost much of their momentum. It was difficult to claim innocence when there was written evidence of systematic discrimination. Garrett Thompson hadn't escaped consequences either. His bank had launched an internal investigation after the videos went viral, examining whether his behavior with Sky Elite reflected broader issues within their organization. Thompson had been placed on leave pending the results. Mr. Walters, Jamal's assistant, called from the doorway, "Your 3 o'clock is here." The 3 o'clock appointment wasn't another job candidate but a meeting with regulatory officials from the Department of Transportation. Rather than waiting for them to come to him, Jamal had proactively invited them to review the company's practices and oversee the reform process. Transparency isn't just a buzzword, he explained to the board when some members questioned this approach. It's our path to redemption as a company. As the afternoon progressed, Jamal received an unexpected visitor. Victoria Chambers, the board member who had most strongly supported his reforms, arrived unannounced. "I wanted to see the changes firsthand," she explained as Jamal showed her around the transformed headquarters. "The board receives your daily updates, but there's nothing like witnessing it in person." They paused at a large monitor displaying real-time customer feedback, categorized by various demographics to ensure service quality remained consistent across all passenger groups. Some board members were concerned about the cost, Victoria admitted. $4 million for the initial phase of reforms seemed excessive to them. "And what do you think?" Jamal asked. "I think it's a bargain compared to what continuing the old way would have cost us," she replied. "Not just in potential lawsuits, but in lost customers and damaged reputation." Jamal nodded. "Exactly. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. We were alienating entire demographics of potential customers while creating liability and breeding a toxic culture that drove away talent." As they continued their tour, they passed a training session in progress. New customer service representatives were participating in role-playing scenarios designed to identify and address unconscious bias. "The culture is changing," Victoria observed. "You can feel it in the building." "It's a start," Jamal acknowledged. "Real transformation takes time and consistent effort. But the foundation is being laid." Before leaving, Victoria asked the question many had been wondering, will you stay? Once the initial changes are implemented, will you remain actively involved with Sky Elite? Jamal considered the question carefully. My original plan was to guide the transformation and then return to my primary business interests. But I've come to realize that maintaining the changes will require ongoing vigilance. So yes, I'll be maintaining an active role in governance, though not in day-to-day operations once the right leadership team is in place. As Victoria departed, Tasha approached with breaking news. The Industry Association just announced they're forming a task force on equitable treatment standards, using our new policies as a starting framework. 3 other airlines have already committed to implementing similar reforms. This was perhaps the most meaningful indicator of success. The ripple effect extending beyond Sky Elite to potentially transform practices industry-wide. The work was far from complete, but as Jamal looked around at the bustling activity of people committed to creating real change, he felt a deep satisfaction. What had begun as a humiliating experience was catalyzing transformation that would benefit countless passengers and employees in the future. The cost had been high, financially, emotionally, and professionally for many involved. But as Jamal had told the board, some prices were worth paying for lasting change. 3 months after the flight, Jamal Walters found himself once again at JFK International Airport, boarding a Sky Elite Airways plane bound for Los Angeles. This time, there was no anonymity. As he approached the gate, he was greeted by name by staff who recognized him not from photos or special notifications, but from his regular presence during the company's transformation. "Good morning, Mr. Walters," said the gate agent, a woman named Keisha Taylor who had been hired during the recent expansion of the customer service team. "Your seat in 2A is confirmed. We're boarding in about 10 minutes. Jamal nodded appreciatively, noting the professional, respectful service that showed no signs of either discrimination or special treatment. This was exactly what he had been working to establish, consistency regardless of who was being served. As he waited in the boarding area, Jamal observed the interactions between staff and passengers. The changes were subtle but significant. Consistent greetings regardless of passenger appearance, clear communication about policies, and an atmosphere of respect that had been missing during his previous flight. When boarding began, the process was orderly and efficient. As Jamal settled into seat 2A, the very seat from which he had been displaced 3 months earlier, he experienced a moment of powerful symmetry. The airline had come full circle, but everything had changed. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Walters," greeted a flight attendant Jamal hadn't met before. His nameplate read, "Devin Harris. Can I offer you a pre-flight beverage? Water, juice, or champagne?" "Sparkling water with lime, please," Jamal requested, watching carefully for the response. Without hesitation, Devin prepared the drink exactly as requested and served it promptly. The simple interaction, receiving the service he had been denied months ago, represented the fundamental change Jamal had worked to implement. As other first-class passengers boarded, Jamal noticed that Devin greeted each one with identical courtesy and attention. There were no subtle shifts in tone or service quality based on appearance or perceived status. When the cabin door closed and preparations for departure began, Devin paused beside Jamal's seat. "Mr. Walters," he said quietly, "I hope it's not inappropriate, but I wanted to thank you personally." "For what?" Jamal asked. "For the changes you've made to the company," Devin explained. "I was a flight attendant with United for 6 years, but as a black man, I hit a ceiling there. No matter how high my performance ratings, I couldn't seem to advance to international routes or leadership positions." He gestured subtly around the cabin. "Sky Elite's new hiring practices and promotion policies gave me an opportunity one never thought I'd have. Next month, I start training as a service director." Jamal nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly what these changes were designed to do, create equal opportunity based on merit, not appearance." "It's working," Devin confirmed. "The difference in culture is real. We can feel it." As the flight progressed, Jamal observed countless small details that indicated genuine change, the diverse crew working together seamlessly, the consistent service standards applied to all passengers, the absence of the subtle cues of preferential treatment he had witnessed during the flight. Halfway through the journey, Jamal opened his laptop to review the latest performance metrics. The numbers told a compelling story. Customer satisfaction scores had initially dipped during the turbulent transition period but had now rebounded to the highest levels in company history. More significantly, the satisfaction ratings showed consistent scores across all demographic groups, the clearest indicator that service quality had been standardized. Employee retention had improved by 17%, while applications for open positions had increased by over 200%. People wanted to work for the new Sky Elite. Most impressively, after the initial stock drop, share values had not only recovered but increased by 22% compared to pre-incident levels. The market had recognized that a more equitable company was also a more profitable one. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Jamal closed his laptop and gazed out the window. The sprawling city below represented both memory and possibility. The site of his humiliation had become the birthplace of transformation. After landing, Jamal made his way through the terminal where the reckoning had taken place. The customer service desk that had once been staffed by dismissive employees now featured a diverse team actively engaging with passengers' needs. As he passed an airport coffee shop, a familiar face caught his attention. Brenda Calloway, the flight attendant who had been at the center of the discriminatory incident, was working behind the counter. Their eyes met briefly, mutual recognition immediate. After a moment's consideration, Jamal entered the coffee shop and approached the counter. "Hello, Brenda," he said simply. Her face flushed with recognition and embarrassment. "Mr. Walters. I didn't expect to see you." "Life has unexpected moments," Jamal replied. "May I have a medium black coffee, please?" With slightly trembling hands, she prepared his order. As she handed him the cup, she spoke in a low voice. "I lost everything because of that day," she said, not quite accusatory but clearly affected. 20 years as a flight attendant, my pension, my healthcare." Jamal considered her words carefully. "You lost those things because of choices made over many years, not because of a single day. That day merely brought those choices to light." Brenda's expression hardened slightly, then softened into something more complex, perhaps the beginning of understanding. "I've had a lot of time to think," she admitted. "Working here, it's different. I serve everyone the same because that's the job. And honestly, it's easier than trying to figure out who deserves special treatment." Jamal nodded. "That's the point. Equal treatment isn't just right, it's actually more efficient." After a pause, he continued. "Sky Elite has implemented a second chance program for former employees who complete cultural competency training and demonstrate genuine commitment to equitable practices. If you're interested, I can have HR send you the application information." Surprise registered on Brenda's face. "You'd consider letting me return? After what happened?" "Transformation isn't just about removing problematic elements," Jamal explained. "It's about creating opportunities for growth and change. The program has strict requirements and a probationary period, but yes, there's a path back for those who genuinely want to be part of the solution." As Jamal left the coffee shop, he reflected on the journey of the past 3 months. The incident that had begun with discrimination had catalyzed far-reaching changes not just within Sky Elite but throughout the industry. Other airlines had begun implementing similar reforms, recognizing that equitable treatment wasn't just a moral imperative but a business advantage. Boarding his car to head to his Los Angeles office, Jamal received a text from Zora Jackson, who was now officially the head of Sky Elite's Passenger Advocacy Department. First quarterly report shows 94% resolution rate for all passenger complaints, with no statistical difference across demographic groups. "We're getting there." The message captured what Jamal had been working toward. Measurable, sustainable change that would outlast the initial reaction to a viral incident. As his car pulled away from the airport, Jamal gazed back at the Sky Elite terminal. What had happened there hadn't just been about one black executive's experience with discrimination. It had been about recognizing that systems only change when those with power demand accountability and commit to transformation. The true measure of success wasn't just what had changed in the past 3 months, but what would continue changing in the years to come. Like an aircraft gaining altitude, the trajectory had been set, now the journey could truly begin. What would you do if you were in Jamal's position? Would you have revealed your identity immediately, or would you have documented the discrimination as he did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of justice and transformation powerful, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore important social issues. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear that change is possible when brave people stand up for what's right. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just personal success, it's using that success to create systemic change. Jamal Walters' story teaches us that real change requires both position and purpose. While many successful people experience discrimination, few use their power to create systemic transformation. True leadership isn't just climbing to the top, it's rebuilding the ladder for others to follow. When Jamal revealed his ownership, he could have simply fired those who wronged him, but instead he recognized the deeper cultural issues that needed addressing. The airline's discrimination wasn't just about individual prejudice but institutional practices that rewarded treating certain customers better than others. By implementing transparency, accountability systems, and creating paths for both consequences and redemption, Jamal demonstrated that meaningful change requires comprehensive approaches. Perhaps most importantly, the story shows that confronting discrimination isn't just morally right, it's good business. By creating fair treatment standards, Sky Elite ultimately became more profitable, proving that equity and excellence go hand in hand. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't just personal success, but using that success to ensure others don't face the same barriers. What discrimination have you witnessed or experienced that needed addressing at a systemic level? Have you ever been in a position where you could have spoken up but didn't? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up against discrimination creates positive change for everyone. Thank you for watching, and remember, true transformation happens when we use our influence, however large or small, to create the world we want to see.